It's been fascinating listening to all sides of the debate about who is to blame for the outbreak of war in the Ukraine. There are those who blame NATO and the EU, others who blame the US, and there are even a few people out there who blame the Russian communist dictator and former head of the KGB. No, really? As Andrew Bolt pointed out on Thursday, we even had one silly woman blame white privilege. I just can't see a scenario where a brown or black leader of Russia would be allowed to invade Ukraine with no devastating consequences. White supremacy will destroy us all, she wrote. This isn't discussed much, she added, but Putin very much benefits from white privilege. No. The reason it's not discussed much is because, of course, it is nonsense. Need I remind people of the genocide in Darfur, genocide in Rwanda, genocide in the Congo, genocide in Zimbabwe, genocide in Uganda, genocide of the Yazidis, genocide of the Kurds, genocide of the Uyghurs, genocide of the Rohingyas. Not much white supremacy there. So I don't think Putin benefits from white privilege, but what he does benefit from is a weak West, and in particular, the pathetically weak Western alliance known as NATO, which may as well stand for not able to operate. It was Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo who, of course, were the first Americans to bother to tell the Europeans, as Rita showed us earlier, what was obvious to those of us, and there are very few of us remaining, even in this country, who recognize that peace lies in strength, and strength lies in energy. If you destroy your cheap, affordable energy, you not only disarm yourself, you invite aggression from those who have not destroyed their own energy supplies.
Germany is a captive of Russia because they got rid of their coal plants, they got rid of their nuclear. They're getting so much of the oil and gas from Russia. I think it's something that NATO has to look at. I think it's very inappropriate. You and I agree that it's inappropriate. I don't know what you can do about it now, but it certainly doesn't seem to make sense that they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and now we have to defend them against Russia.
Under Donald Trump, the US was not just moving towards energy independence, it was the world's largest oil and gas producer. Under Biden, however, the US has been shutting down pipelines, banning drilling on federal lands, and defunding energy projects through banks, through environmental social governance. Yes, that means you, four banks. To quote Mark Morano, the US has declared war on fossil fuels. As Roger Kimball writes in The Spectator this week, snap quiz, who was president when Vladimir Putin gobbled up Crimea? If you said Barack Obama, go to the head of the class. Second question, what countries did Putin invade while Donald Trump was president? If you said none, you get to stay at the head of the class. Or as journalist Zoe Strimple writes on Barry Weiss's excellent Common Sense blog, deterrence is a simple equation. Capability multiplied by will, as former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said, and added, I think that many of our adversaries today think US will is about zero. I think we're set up for a cascading crisis now in large measure because of the perception that United States will is diminished. And I would add to that not only America's will, but America's military capability has been greatly diminished. In recent war games, for example, the US was defeated. Diminished capability multiplied by diminished will equals war. Strimple adds in her piece, there is a reason that Teddy Roosevelt's famous 1901 pronouncement, speak softly and carry a big stick, has become something of a cliche. It's because it works. Today, almost no one in any position of authority is willing to make a moral argument for going to war. Zoe is only partially correct there, those were her words, in my opinion. Many of our leaders do, in fact, make a moral case for going to war. It's just they're fighting the wrong war with the wrong enemy. Laughably, nearly all our leaders, most of our media, and many of our business leaders believe we are at war with the climate. Here's one former PM.
Climate change is the great moral challenge of our generation. Climate change is not just an environmental challenge. Climate change is an economic challenge, a social challenge, and actually represents a deep challenge on the overall question of national security.
Right, so climate change is a threat to our national security, Kevin. Right. Better mobilise all our forces. We shall fight them in the school halls. We shall fight them in the insulated rooftops. We shall fight them with our pink-backed aliens. Or here's another former PM, Malcolm Turnbull, flying into Sydney during the bushfires 2 years ago as if he was flying into a war zone and ranting about hotter, drier summers and blaming it all on climate change. Funny, no scary Instagram posts from Turnbull over the last weekend while it's been bucketing down in Sydney. But I digress. Even Scott Morrison has jumped idiotically on the climate change bandwagon at just the wrong moment, committing this nation to net zero emissions by 2050 with no credible plan to replace the reliable and affordable and cheap base load energy which coal currently gives us. What's this got to do with the Ukraine? Well, everything. What a belligerent communist Russia is to Eastern Europe, a belligerent communist China is to our neck of the woods. In both instances, peace is determined by, and will only ever be determined by, the West's military and industrial capability multiplied by the will of her people. As Melanie Phillips writes on her excellent blog, the green dream goes lethal. Through their unhinged obsession with climate change, America, Britain, and Europe have handed Putin his greatest weapon against them. In their determination, she writes, to reduce carbon emissions by turning against fossil fuels and having put so many of their eggs in the basket of renewables, which are desperately unreliable as national sources of energy, they have made themselves overly dependent on gas. She then references Senator Marco Rubio.
The third is energy. You know, while Biden's been working on this Green New Deal, which is a joke and ridiculous and terrible, Russia's become the second largest natural gas supplier in the world, the third largest oil exporter. And so between sanctions and invasion and disruption, you could see the price of a barrel of petroleum go up to at least $110. At least, could be even higher, but at least $110 per barrel. And let me tell you what that translates to. That translates to a gallon of regular gas in America of $4.01. It's already high, it could get that high. So that's why what's happening there matters, and we should be paying attention, and we need to do things to buffer us from the impact this is going to have on our country.
Melanie Phillips concludes, so now Putin, with his hand on the gas spigots which he can open or shut at will, has the power to restrict gas supplies, send the price of gas shooting up, and inflict on Western nations both power outages and eye-watering increases in their cost of living. Western countries are already paying dearly for their supreme green folly. I mentioned exquisite timing. After years of successfully holding out against the lunacy of net zero, the coalition capitulated last October.
Driving down the cost of technology and enabling it to be adopted at scale is at the core of the Australian way to reach our target of net zero emissions by 2050 that we are committing to at this COP26.
To their eternal shame, the Nats, the Nationals, went along with this lunacy. Now only a handful of parties, minority parties, One Nation, Clive Palmer and Craig Kelly's UAP, and the Liberal Democrats are standing firm and protecting Australians from this net zero nonsense. Funnily enough, towards the end of his speech, Scott Morrison made a very telling slip of the tongue. See if you can spot it.
The scene is set. Global momentum to tackle climate change is building.
China. Yes, China is the big threat, not climate change. But no sooner had Morrison run up the white flag to that terrifying enemy number one, the climate, than Britain and Europe were plunged into an energy nightmare of blackouts and soaring prices, thanks partly to a cold and windless winter, a wind drought no less, in which the precious wind turbines all stood motionless. No wonder rebels within the British Conservative Party are frantically plotting to abandon, yes, Scott, abandon net zero. And also, with exquisite timing this weekend, the Australian newspaper, whose headline is, of course, about the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, this weekend also carries a special supplement called The List that reveals and celebrates the top 100 innovators, developers, financiers, and activists who are shaping the nation's new green economy. You couldn't make this stuff up. Oh, and look who's in there. Twiggy Forrest with his green hydrogen fantasies. The unctuous Simon Holmes at court who is financing all those phony independents like Allegra Spender and Wentworth. Oh, and what a surprise! Mike Cannon-Brookes, the software billionaire who wants to buy up our coal-fired power plants, which provide us with all our cheap, reliable and affordable energy, the sort of energy we will need in the event of any conflict with, oh, I don't know, Communist China. And Mike wants to buy them up in order to close them all down. Did I mention, by the way, that in 2009, Mike Cannon-Brookes was honoured to be recognised by the climate-obsessed World Economic Forum as a young global leader. And Mike is currently a member of the Forum of Young Global Leaders. Fancy that. And finally, if you want to know just how insane this climate obsession is, have a listen to former US presidential candidate and member of the woeful Biden administration, John Kerry, responding to the invasion of Ukraine.
Hopefully President Putin would realize that in the northern part of his country, they used to live on 66% of a nation that was over frozen land. Now it's thawing, and his infrastructure is at risk, and the people of Russia are at risk. And so I hope President Putin will help us to stay on track.
To stay on track on climate change. To stay on track on climate change. Can you believe that? You heard that right. One of Biden's most senior officials last week, when contemplating the first major military invasion in Europe since World War II, was saying, I hope President Putin will help us to stay on track with respect to what we need to do for the climate.